Hi, and welcome back to the course, R for Journalists. In this section, we're going to talk about R Markdown. By now, you've inadvertently witnessed the different content that R Markdown can help generate. The HTML documents that is in every single one of these folders that you've worked with throughout the class. Notebooks that you run chunks in individually, like this. And PDFs that you can print out along, so you can follow along physically with the course. And this entire journalism website, all produced through R Markdown. So, what is R Markdown? Well, you got to start with what is Markdown. So Markdown is a very easy way to add formatting to plain text. And it's something that was created by John Gruber of Daring Fireball as a simple way for non-programming types to type in an easy-to-read format that could be converted directly into HTML. So you see that this is what Markdown might look like. And this is what HTML looks like on the right. So how it's interpreted. So R Markdown, or .rmd files, it's a simple way to embed chunks of R code, or languages like Python, in Markdown documents. So on one level, it allows you to present your analysis, process, and results in a format that doesn't require R to run for others. But the code is still there if a researcher or another journalist is compelled to wanting to reproduce or add to your work. So it's a version of literate programming. By combining your R code with documentation, it makes your programming more robust, portable, and easier to maintain. So at the click of a button or the type of a command, you can rerun the code in an R Markdown file to reproduce your work and export the results as a finished product. Let me show you how it looks in PDF. So this is it in HTML. Let's try this in PDF. Right. So this is pretty familiar, right? So R Markdown works thanks to the knitr package, which runs code embedded in Markdown. And it also runs because of Pandoc, which converts Markdown into a bunch of different output formats like Word, PDF, HTML, books, dashboards. There's a lot of options. So if you produce PDFs, it's very useful to editors and reporters because it really impresses them if you give them an analysis that kind of looks like this, printed out, you hand it to them, it makes it just seem very official. My theory is that it's the font. The font makes it stand out. It also can handle IPython notebooks are very popular, and that's the Python version of what we've got here. Pandas and IPython notebooks renders very well in GitHub. If you try to, here's an example. So it looks very similar to what the output would be for us in RStudio. But RMD files rendered in GitHub starts out with something like this weird little table, and a lot of the stuff won't render. Right? It says we have stuff like this up in the top. And that's because each RMD file has its own custom YAML section at the top. And YAML stands for yet another Markdown language. But what it is these keywords are used and combined with the right packages to recognize how to output these files. So as you saw, this was how to output it as a PDF document. And this is just how to output it as an HTML file. GitHub doesn't know how to interpret those kind of tags. And so so it doesn't even try to make it work. It just says this is what I could figure out. But this is okay though. We don't need GitHub to recognize our Markdown files, because our Markdown files outputs as HTML, and which you can still host on GitHub pages, and you can have links to the actual page, that HTML page, but doing so can be more effective than having an RMD file render in a GitHub repo, because rendering in HTML lets you add CSS and JavaScript, and it lets you include content like this interactive table right here. And you can filter, and so we got down to 1, and then you can, there's an add-on to export the data, which can be very useful. So yeah, so that's what it looks like when you're exporting it, just through that document right there. So that was rendered using the DT package, and we don't have to create the code to display it. We don't have to come up with a JavaScript, with jQuery. It just worked because the folks who ported the Data Tables jQuery plugin over to R wanted to make it seamless. So you can pass certain arguments to the function data table, and you can include buttons. And it looks like this. So we played around with data tables before, but you pass in a couple of options, like where the filter should be, if you want to add buttons to export data, and it's just right there. So can you imagine the power of that? So let's say you've transformed the data collected, and instead of sending the reporters a huge spreadsheet with a bunch of sheets on the bottom that they have to flip through, you send them a link to this analysis that you've got, and let them figure out what is important to them, and then they can export it themselves, and they can have their own sheet forever and ever. And you can also export it. You can also include in your analysis these leaflet maps that we've also done in the previous chapter. So this is kind of an important kind of development for journalists, because reporters sometimes aren't very organized. Let me see if I can open this up. So this is an example of someone's desktop that I just kind of asked permission to take a photo of. And how often have you had someone email you asking if you could resend your summarized spreadsheet to them again? So, and it's not their fault. It's just they get a lot of data. They get a lot of PDFs and spreadsheets and news alerts, and they just sometimes shove it places. So the solution is to send them links instead, because they'll always have it in their email. They can do it when they do a search. They can just say, this is the place. If you have built them up for them, you can say all my analysis reports are going to be here. So you can just click this link and you can find out where it is. So you can host the HTML of your analysis somewhere, maybe on your internal work network, or you can host it on GitHub pages for free, like this one. This is all hosted free, and this is an analysis. And then you can, share with reporters and let them explore it, and let them download customized sheets. And if your analysis gets updated with new data, if you have new data to run it, then you just run the entire script, and then you can push out the code to GitHub pages, and then you don't have to resend them new updates. You just send them an email and be like, hey, the analysis is updated. Can you hit refresh on the page? Just remember to hit refresh. And that's it. So I'm going to go over the basic structure of an R Markdown file. What you need to do is first click on File, click on New File, and click on R Markdown. Or click on this little green button and click on R Markdown. And let's just call it R Markdown page. And we're going to leave HTML selected below, and you can put in your name here as author. Okay, and so this is an R Markdown file. And when you first create one, it gives you a bunch of test code, so you can see what it already looks like. It starts out the same at the top. This is the YAML header. There's optional section of render options. It always starts out like some kind of key value pair like that. It always looks like that. So it's at the start of the file. It begins with these 3 lines and it ends with that 3 lines. And this is a way for knitter to understand that this section can be ignored, and everything between those lines needs to be like parsed out, and then to let it know how to build. So if it was output PDF, then this would send as a PDF instead. So everything in this gray area is our code, and it's and these little 3 hash back ticks. That's the key next to the 1 button. Lets I guess knitter our Markdown know that everything in between it is going to be code. And then you put this little squiggle parenthesis. There's a better word for this. I'm going to look it up after this video. But squiggle parenthesis and then R, and then it lets you know that everything in here is our code. If this was like Python, you can then use Python code there instead. And then after the R is a space, and then this is the label for this particular code. And that's important because later on, once you build up a longer R Markdown file, then you can switch to the different chunks, right? So you don't get lost. And it's good to break up the chunks, because if something fails as you're generating this file later on, it'll tell you what chunk it failed on, and so then you can zero in on that area and fix the error. So these are little arguments that can be passed to that will say, like, this one, include false, means this code won't show up in the actual output of the file. It will still run, but it won't reflect in the actual document. Echo false means you won't see this code, but you'll see the output of it. There's a list of all these extra arguments in R Markdown that we'll go over later. So everything else right here is just regular Markdown and text that you can build a narrative around. So this means that this will be an H2 header. You can pass on HTML as well, and this double star means this knit will be bold. So yeah, you can write the document this way. You want to label the code. You can run the chunks individually, notebook style. Let's see, so summary. So this is little chunks at a time. And there. So that's that. If you've worked with pandas or notebooks before, this is very similar to that. And so now for us, we just click knit to create a report. I'm going to call this first report. And it's going to render. And render very quickly. But you see on the R Markdown, I'm going to quick shift over there. You can see the output, and you see it goes by label, and it gives you % of how far it's gone. So it was cars, label pressure. So if it failed, it would say error, and it would tell you where. But this is the output right here. Okay. So then you saw the summary, had the text. You saw knit was bold. You saw R Markdown was an H2. And you saw, let's see, right? What happened? This knitter options echo didn't show up in here, but this summary did. And this line of code did not show up in the code because of echo false. Let's see. Yeah. So you got the build log, you've got the IDE, and now it's in your folder as well. It's going to be in your project folder. So there it is, first project report. And you can open up in a web browser, and this is how it renders. And that's that. So I think you've got the output file. And so this is the beginning of hopefully a journey into creating more R Markdown files. So next I'm going to show you some really cool options that you can pass to R Markdown to make really more compelling presentations for your reports. So I'll see you there.